Hi everyone, welcome to TED Talks. Today we're here to talk about mind maps and how different types might approach making them. This may not be a type related topic. If anything, we'll learn a lot about mind maps, but we might find some trends among types and see how a type expresses themselves through mind maps potentially. So this is more of a qualitative dive to see if there are any trends. But I hope you guys enjoy. So I'll have everyone introduce themselves. And so, Raina, can you let us know a little bit about you?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Joyce. Hi, everybody on the panel. Thanks for having me, Joyce. It's great being back. My name's Raina. I'm an ENFJ, and I love using mind maps in the instructional design world. So that's the work that I've been working on for about the past 10 years. That's how I was introduced to it, actually, I should say. So very type-based. My ISTJ husband, who I work with, uses a lot of mind maps. And what I found very interesting was I noted that I was trying to do mind maps sort of on various sheets of paper using various different mediums, as well as, well, it was quite inefficient. And so being introduced to it as part of the instructional design concept was really neat because it allows us to really hash out in a very pragmatic but also focused way all of our different brainstorming ideas. So I was bringing the brainstorming element to the table in terms of our partnership in instructional design, and he brought the structural piece. And so together we started to really lean into mind maps. From there, I started using mind maps even more just for my personal stuff. So any course I go on, any type of professional development thing that I do, I try to group the information in a mind map so that it's captured. And then after, if I want to move it around and find and group sort of by topic, work on defining things a little bit more. And then what seems to happen is organically, I have a tracking mechanism for my ahas. So as an ENFJ, I do operate a lot with the NI piece. But what was happening for me is I didn't really have a good mechanism for capturing in real time, in one place where those ahas would go. And so what's really nice about this is it allows you to track almost like in real time the process of those ahas and then have it on paper somewhere that I can refer back to, because that was a component that I was also missing. um, is having something that would allow me to track it in one place, because I typically had several places where I was grouping stuff. And also, as an aside, my handwriting really sucks, and so if I have to go from handwriting to this did it all. So yeah, that's how I got introduced to mind maps, and I love them.
Yeah, they get all the key concepts in one place. And if you're a visual learner, I bet that could also add something to the experience as well, too.
Um, yeah, it does. And I find that because I'm nonlinear, it helps from that perspective too. Because if you're trying to develop courseware, if like how you want to break down an idea across a certain amount of time, you can make sure that you haven't missed anything. Particularly if you're nonlinear, like I might jump to the end and then work on that piece and then come back. This really forces me to make sure that it all connects, right? Because I don't just have the vision and then I'm missing oh, point three, that module would have is required. It's not a would be nice. It has to be there.
Yeah, it almost it helps you stay grounded if you're a very nonlinear thinker, for sure, definitely. And so, Austin, I'm curious about you.
Hello, my name is Austin. I am an INFP, and I first used mind maps to try to predict how meeting people or dating would go, which I am not presenting those today, but I was trying to Doctor Strange the possibilities. From then, I am a engineer, so I work in IT, and I'm a DevOps engineer, so I automate a lot of things that people do on a day-to-day life in the world. And so I now use mind maps to kind of lay out what are the things I want to do, and then from there, I go to what makes up the things that I want to do. That way I can hopefully try to achieve the thing that I want to do. Instead of just sitting in it and thinking about it and saying is this possible? I could have further proofs on if it actually is possible and what it would look like.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it started from a very heartfelt place and then it went to a very extroverted thinking TE place of getting stuff done. It helps you track how to get the thing done
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Definitely. So it's almost like Raina and Austin, you use it to compensate for potential weaknesses, and it's like, hey, I'm going to use this to be more logistical. I'm going to use this to be more productive. So, yeah, that's awesome. And Ron?
Yeah, I'm Ron. What do I have to say about myself? Ooh. I always forget. I could talk about my hobbies, but yeah, I started a YouTube channel last year in German, but I didn't get very far because I got lost in the weeds on primary literature on type. And at one point, I thought, okay, I have a list of 1,000 Google Sheet lines. I somehow need to learn a little more about the mechanics, get this on a mind map, how all these things connect to each other. And yeah, this is how I ended up on doing my own mind map. I mean, first I started on paper like this. So it's nice, but then I noticed, oh, there's not enough space. And especially if you notice, oh, I need to reorder this a little, that was quite hard to do on written paper. So I started doing it online.
Very cool. Yeah. Ron's mind maps are very introverted thinking as an ISTP. They're very like refining definitions, being very precise with language. And so it's just interesting how our functions sometimes show ourselves through what we prioritize to mind map. And hi, everyone. My name is Joyce. I'm a certified MBTI master practitioner, and I facilitate the instrument in organizations. I also coach people and I help people on the discovery process of figuring out their best fit type. And so, mind maps. I'm guessing we can start today's chat by going over everyone's sample mind maps. Perhaps we'll start with you, Raina. And so I'm just going to share my screen. Here we go. Finding works heartfelt insight through many perspectives. It's very NF, this entire mind map.
Yeah, so this one is actually, I started tracking, this is probably the oldest mind map, and it was the original. I haven't made many changes to it, but I've since moved on with the Finding Works ideology. But it was just a way for me to group different ideas that I was tracking or that I was curious about. It's kind of like my curiosity mind map. If I had to say this was one of the it was the first attempt at putting all the things that I was curious about in one place so that I wasn't duplicating effort, because this is the pattern that I had observed is I get interested in something and then I do a deep dive and I don't necessarily track my insights and they get lost. So I was like, this is my attempt at tracking those insights in a very pragmatic way, in one place and not several places, because that was the other thing. So this was a personal one. The other example that I have, I think you have another one, Joyce, that's
Yeah.
very, it's really small. I wanted to show that one just to give an idea of maybe what are the dangers of mind maps. So you can see this, I tried to capture the whole thing just to give an idea. So the shape is awful. Ordinarily, you'd want to have it like the information spread out, nicely. But in this instance, these are the rough notes from a course I took with Joyce on tri-type and relating it to MBTI. So it was Joyce and Catherine Faber. And this was just me jotting down all my notes based on the course and grouping them by, key components. And then what I have to go back and do, which I haven't done yet, is track the aha insight and then group the information so that it's more cohesive. There's no repetition. And also like move the map out so that it's not like in one column. In this case, if you were to zoom in, the top piece is actually just all about, if you scroll, the top piece is, I was starting to work the information into like a semi flowchart. So basically it was like in a typing session, if you were using, or a profiling session, if you were going to use tri-type and a BTI, how you would do it together. And so, what you would look at and like steps, and then that could at a certain point become a flowchart if I needed it to.
Yeah, Raina helps out with typing sessions. Like the typing sessions that I do, I guess like these mind maps are really helpful for that as well too, for consolidating learning to make
Yeah.
sure like you retain what you learned. It's interesting how this mind map looks like a skyscraper. So
Yeah, so it's not, I would say, like in this stage, the information is really, it's not quite at the knowledge point. It's more like the beginning of data in groupings that make sense, right? So to move it to the next phase where you can actually use the information to a product or for, you know, some other use, it needs to be grouped better and, as I said, like flow charted if required. In this case, as I said, I would probably only flowchart parts of the information for my uses as it pertains to, you know, a profiling session using, as I mentioned, like MBTI, tri-type, or one or the other. But it also has the information grouped by type and tri-type. So if I wanted that in a different table, I could export that. And I would likely do that because I usually use Excel in sort of hand in hand with a mind map, particularly in the instructional design piece. So if I'm looking at creating coursework for something, I'll start in a mind map, and not like this though. It's usually a mind map with that looked more like the first one, where like everything's kind of going all over the place, to identify all the components. And then as it develops, then I would export it into Excel and break it down, because it allows you to go a little bit further and modularize it. But I like having sort of all the pieces in one place at first until it's fully, I say fully baked or realized. I don't think you can ever really get to that point, but I'm going to say fully baked. So I try to fully bake it in the mind map and then export it for other
yeah.
use.
I wonder if there could be a difference between how extroverts and introverts create mind maps, in that extroverts are more willing to put half-baked ideas or like not fully formed ideas in mind map form, whereas like introvert mind maps might be more polished, or it's like their final thought, almost like the more fully baked in a sense.
I think you could keep working on it. Like, so my husband's mind maps, and this is where I think this is the other issue with mind maps, is that because they're created by the mind of a user, what's very interesting is like there's a very real possibility that at a certain phase in time, that mind map may only make sense to that user. So we've had team sessions where literally the mind map of a certain person was presented, like this is where we are in the phase of this project, and the rest of us were kind of like,
Oh no.
right? And it wasn't just zeroing in on like where, like it wasn't like this mind map, it was more fleshed out. But language use and how your logic has sort of extrapolated the idea and like barfed it onto the page or into the digital world, kind of it matters. So that was interesting too, because in this case, the information was presented in a very linear, like step-by-step way, whereas all the other users in the group are very much like big picture, like give us the overarching concept. And the mind map wasn't introduced that way. It was introduced in a very like linear step-by-step way. And so everyone was confused. And it wasn't just the language, it was like the process. So that's another kind of neat dynamic, I think, right? Is that you almost have to have your mind map translated if you're going to use it in a group workshop.
It's its own language in and of itself, for sure.
100%. Yeah.
And then maybe we can go to Austin and share you.
Yes. So I have 2 examples. So let's do this one right here. This is my incident response chapter example for my security course I was doing. So this is 12.1, module 12.1. Key ideas here. So incident response, forensics recovery, attack frameworks, security incident types, and key terms. And then you just go about mapping what is relevant to this core concept, which is this. It's like application whitelisting and all the things down here. Attack frameworks, the types of attack frameworks, security incident types. And then also here, key terms is just generic key terms for things I needed to track but didn't really have a home per se. So here are all these. So this is example 1 that I would use for like studying. And then another example that I would use is this. And this is more of my DevOps side of things. But this says what would box provisioning look like, which is a software. So we're building a custom API for it, doing API calls. This is what it would look like in the future. It goes down here to new user, needs this and this. Existing box user only needs this. Prerequisites, do they have a tenant? Is it a box business plan? Assigning people to the program. If only one group is assigned, do this. Attributes that may be needed is here. And this as well.
Are they connected in any kind of way? Because I don't see the lines.
Yes.
Are
If
they
I zoom
there?
in, yeah, they're there. Sorry.
Okay.
So if you zoom in, they are really tiny, but they're here. So it's like a flow chart kind of. These go down. Assignments this way. All reporting
Yeah.
back up to here. Assignments, what are they? The core question.
Yeah, it's like a very if then, if this happens, then do this in a
Yes.
very easy to understand kind of way too. So the thing with extroverted thinking is that it lays out logic in a way that most people can understand. So it's like if you do this, you can do this, and then do this. It's very clear logic in that sense.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, I would agree with that. Cause like Reina's were very much the way she described it is that she goes through this experience and she maps all the insights from this experience, and then she uses the mind map to further gain deeper insights relating to the core components that she experienced, which is really beautiful. And I think it's fascinating because I definitely do not do that. That is amazing. Mine
Yeah.
is more like, this is my goal. This is how I get to the goal. This is, if this happens, then this will get me there. If that happens, this will get me there.
Yeah, and you even add emojis to your mind maps too? Like, if this
Yeah.
happens, I will feel happy. If this happens, sad face.
Yeah.
So
Cause
there's the
I don't want the
FY coming
sadness.
out.
Yeah.
Was there a special reason why you left so much space in between these different components?
Yes. So one, my screen is really big. So that's one reason. And then two, I usually have it side by side with my like programming screen, right?
Mm.
And so I take what's on the left and I turn it into functions for the code on the right. And so I always have to like have the larger space so I can use the mouse to zoom in between them and look at everything as a segment instead of a whole.
Okay, interesting. Because
Mm.
I personally always like to zoom out a lot to get the overall overview of all the concepts, all these categories I put together,
Yeah.
and then I zoom in. Okay, now I'm at this point. How does this relate to something else?
Yeah, I don't know. So it's like I have the core idea in the middle, and then if I know that I have the core idea in the middle, right? And I know that's where I started, then I'm perfectly okay zooming in on these separate components because I know that, well, I know, and I also have faith that it'll all come down to the middle part of where I started. So
Hmm.
if I know it's going to go to that point, I don't really see the need to zoom out and see the whole thing all the time because I created it. It started there. It's going in this direction. You know what I mean? It's fascinating that you look at the whole thing out like from a wide view, and you're like, "Whoa, this is how it all relates to each other." Yeah.
Here,
Yeah.
I mean, let's say, here, I mean, really, when I did all these details and then zoom out, and I feel really great and proud. Wow, I did so much stuff there. It connects there. Everything aligns perfectly, at least from my kind of reasoning, cause and effect, how it all connects. And yeah, I think I probably only zoom out because it's more satisfying to see it as the whole picture. But when I start out, then for sure I'm more on these nitty-gritty details and start from there. But then it gets bigger and bigger, and at one point I also see, oh, this maps also nicely together. Wow.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Ron, we would love to see your mind map.
Yeah. Let me share
Yes.
screen. Yeah, so that's my current mind map I'm working on. It's not complete yet. I mean, there should be a lot more stuff on there. But yeah, it's in German, so most of you probably will not be able to do a lot with it. But in the end, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to get these main categories of sensing, intuition, thinking, and feeling. And then I also see, okay, these two, they are perception, and these two, they are there to make decisions. Yeah, and that's in the end where I just start from that, and then I went really in the nitty-gritty details and checked, okay, what is thinking, what is it called, what's doing here, and how does this actually connect to the overall perception, the complete framework of the human psyche. And before I did this mind map, I was not even aware about this. But now I know, hey, first you're perceiving something with your senses. So you see something, you hear something, whatever the case may be. And then just based on this, you generate some internal images. These images don't even need to be conscious. They can also be unconscious. And based on that, I also saw some other videos where they talked about, hey, when you perceive, take in information, there are, what was it? I think here somewhere, 11 million bits per second you take in information. So quite a lot. But all of that, to actually consciously use it, there are only 50 bits you can consciously, what's called, work on. So you see, there's quite a discrepancy. But this 11 million, it does not get completely lost. So we need to have some kind of patterns going around. So some kind of patterns, and these patterns are more or less a pattern mapped as an unconscious image. They don't necessarily can't explain it. As soon as you try to explain it, it's not the same as you actually perceived it. But like this, they somehow map these patterns together, and this makes it easier to make decisions because we just don't have the capacity to be able to do all of this at once. Yeah, and so like this, I more or less get to the foundations and went through all these categories, and then I thought, hey, what's thinking? What is the basic of that? And yeah, and then I got really in the nitty-gritty details. First thing I started with, I googled the word "what's truth." So Wahrheit is in German the word truth, and in German it was quite interesting because in German how it was defined, it was described as something Tatsächliches. And tatsächlich, if I would translate it to English, Tat is in the end what is happening, and Sache, sächlich, would be the content of what is happening. So just from this, you already know, hey, truth is in the end nothing else, some kind of observation of what is currently happening. And based on that, I just went from the next to the next to the next, and defined it just based on that, and could get connections like, hey, in the end, truth is nothing else than a cause and effect. Something is the cause, something is the effect from cause. And based on that, I could also derive something like, hey, what is actually cause and effect? It's in the end a function. A function is nothing else than an effect of something happening. I know, way too many details. And in my video, when I was explaining the thinking part, that videos at least up on my German channel, it probably took me around an hour or something like that to go through all these nitty-gritty details. But yeah, just from the mind map, I'm going from this one word, checking what is this definition of this word, and then if it's described through other words, I also go to the other words which are describing that, and then I also ended quite a lot of times, okay, where was this word originally coming from? What's the word origin of that word? And yeah, when you just go there, you really notice, the word origin is just a basic concept from your normal perception, because many things which are described in the language, especially in German, they are have quite a few words which have the word ziehen in the word itself. And ziehen in English would be something like draw or tracking something. Has also to do a lot with values, so with the feeling function. And it's so interesting how to do it, because then you can just imagine if you have a certain value. In the end, it's something like, hey, you try to track, or you get pulled towards this value, or you track it behind you because you can't just leave this value alone. And yeah, I'm probably talking too much on that right now, but it's super interesting that really everything goes back to your five senses. At least our language itself goes back to the five senses, and just some wordings, they usually originate originally from some other word origins which had something like normal stuff. Hey, you go in a direction, you look forward, you look backward, you look inward, you look outward, introversion, extroversion. These kind of things all derived from simple perception. And yeah, I just went from one word to another word. And German, for that, for definitions, it's super nice. I mean, German itself is a super dry language if you want to learn it, and actually also quite complicated as far as I heard about, at least. But the cool thing about German is all these words, let's maybe go to this one here. They are more or less, they quite often have a prefix in the wording itself. And this prefix usually already has a meaning. And the interesting thing is about the feeling function. You would translate it in German with Gefühl and this GE. So this part here, GE, in the end stands for some kind of unity. And this Fühl is in the end just fühlen, you feel, and then you know, oh, feeling is nothing else than a unity. You're uniting, you're harmonizing your different feelings you have towards something to make your decision. And these kind of things, sometimes you can just derive them naturally from the language itself. And yeah, and that's why I got lost in the weeds. And then you see this leads to that, to that, to that. Yeah, how would I describe my mind mapping? I'm really going into the nitty-gritty details, check where's the stuff coming from originally, how was it defined, and then it's really cause and effect. We have a cause of something, the word, and what's happening after that cause, the effect.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, introverted thinking right here. So you'll notice that both Austin and Ron's mind maps have to do with cause and effect, but in different ways. So like Ron's mind map is about cause and effect because he's trying to understand the logical underpinning of things and the origin of and the principles of logic. But then it's hard for like people outside of Ron to understand it without an in-depth explanation. Like it requires a lot of explanation to truly understand the TI framework because you have to understand how this node connects to this node, connects to this node, and then you finally get what it actually is. Whereas if you stare at Austin's mind map, it's very cause and effect, but it's very it's almost like obvious logic. So someone who's looking at it can actually immediately understand what it is. Like with extroverted thinking, you look at it and you get it because it's about do this, you get here, do this, you get here. So it's very, TE in itself has a linearity to it that TI doesn't, in a sense. It's interesting to see how functions can really play out in what we do, even down to our way of organizing information. And then Reina's is very NF. It's going deeper into the NI insight of something, but it's usually of NF-ish topics around like people, human potential, how we can all reach our potential, and cultivating a sense of love and peace and growth in individuals. So
I was going to say that the examples that I used were for my personal mind maps. I didn't show you any work ones because I can't. But the work ones look more like Austin. So the end state has to be usable because at the end of the day, we're developing courseware, right? So there has to be a TE logic of like, this is the learning objective. Like we have to actually get to that. So the first one that I showed would have been like the brainstorming of those things. But at the end of the day, you have to end up with something that looks more like Ron's, but has the linearity of it so that you can say very quickly at a glance, we've covered off all the learning components to this learning objective. Therefore, this task can now be completed, right? So where it's really nice is you can start from the logic of, say, like Ron's, where he's looking at the why behind the why. And I love the German aspect of it because like it's a compound use of words. So there was a word I thought would be really cool if you showed us. It was, I'm going to butcher it because my German is super, super basic, but like it was like prioritizing in a hierarchy fashion was the compound word, priori, whatever that was. It was on the bottom right of your thing, but the language itself, like not only does it give you the roots, but it gives you like, it's a compound, like all the words are this big, right? If it really has to matter, you're going to get the whole evolution of the word. So if we would say priority, his word was like priority with the hierarchy, which is a level of depth that you need if you're looking at it from the TI lens first. So it's like, wow, type through a German lens. Like, that's super cool, right? Because it gives you, like, the idea of word use, like the words that we use matter. If we can't communicate the idea behind the word the same way, like, we're not even actually talking about the same thing. Like, to Ron's point, that's why I think it's so awesome what you're doing. Like, yes, it's super nitty gritty, but there is a point to that, because at the end of it, when you boil it down, like, are we talking about the same concept? Or are we not? You don't know if you really haven't gone through the evolution of the word that was used to describe the thing. Like, it's, yeah.
Yeah, and then Reina as the ENFJ is like, the root of what you're doing is meaningful. I can see the purpose behind your action. It's very moving.
It's comprehensive too, though. Like, my TI loves that it's your I think part of the zoom in, zoom out is, like, you have to zoom out of your mind map to see, like, does this thing still make sense with the pieces, right? At a certain point, until you get to the Austin phase where you're in the flow chart. As you're confirming that you've actually got to the flow chart, you have to zoom out to be like, do I have all the pieces? Is there a new piece that's missing? If there is, you have to put it in. Like, once you've got to the Austin phase, if your piece is missing, then I don't want to say you're screwed, but your flow chart doesn't work, right? But if you're still in that testing phase, like I would say Ron is still, like, he's got it out, he's still making sure he's got all the components, but then you have to test it. Like, does the logic hold true? And then if you get a new idea, where does it go? Is it an outlier in Ron's case? Like, he had that other section on the left there where he was like, these don't fit. I was going to ask you, so where do they fit, Ron? Or sorry, not Ron, Austin. Like, do you need that information? Like, what do you do when you have information that doesn't fit? Like, that's yeah, I think that's cool too, because that always happens. You always end up with information that doesn't fit, and you're like, now what?
I mean, for me, I will always try to fit it in somehow. Except it's a completely different topic. If it's not about personality types, okay, and maybe some other part. But as personality type, especially the ones we are using here, not Enneagram, but the Jungian one, they're in the end just 4 basic functions of the psyche. So everyone has them. So everything would be mappable to them in some kind of way.
Yeah, everything must fit within the framework. Yeah. All right, cool. I'm curious if you guys have any final thoughts, any insights you got from looking at each other's frameworks or at each other's mind maps.
Yes, I noticed in Rena's mind map, it was a lot about, how to call it, communication, connection in a sense. So from the first mind map you showed, yeah, there you really saw the FE in there. Because when I would do this kind of organization, I probably would have it in the back of my mind, but I probably wouldn't put it on the mind map at all, because that would not be my main purpose. Because my main purpose would be, okay, how can I make it work that everyone can understands what this mind map is doing, that they can use it for themselves, and yeah, and I also have to be careful that I don't overcomplicate things. Yeah, that would be a different focus. That's something I noticed.
This is gonna sound really strange to say, but Raina's map felt very warm. That's probably very strange to say, but I saw like mom with many kids, and I saw some other components there. I'm like, oh, that's really warm. She's a person. This is great, and I felt very nice. Probably not what you're looking for. Like when someone looks at my map, they're not like, I'm gonna feel warm from looking at this, but I'm just like,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, feelers are going to be analyzing the vibes of things. They're like, "Oh, this is a warm vibe." And that's the first thing they notice. So,
yeah, that was, I was like, oh, okay, this is nice. This is warm. This is toasty. I could keep looking at this. Continue, please. Yeah,
oh.
yeah. So that's my thing. Sorry. And then like both of your guys is like, okay, I now feel like I have a better understanding of how TI looks in the world, because it was a foreign concept to me. So now I know that we are going back and we are analyzing each component of these things, and we're looking for the truths behind each of these things. And what are they? What are they actually? Not what are they at a surface level, but what are they at the very core of what they are, and how do they relate to each other? And so Ron's kind of starts there where he's going through all these language roots and he's like mapping out like, what does this mean? No, that's not the right word. What does it actually mean? And he finds it and he grabs it. Raina is also doing the same thing. Of course, we didn't get the finished version because she's going through the brainstorm phase in the other. But with Raina's map, she's doing the same thing where she's has these ideas and these concepts mapped, and she wants to know, what are my insights from this? What do I know from this? And that is really cool. Like, I'm
Yeah.
kind of envious. I'm just like, let's go accomplish something. Here's my little flag. Woo! And then these brilliant people are just, I don't know, I'm fascinated. That's all I'm gonna say. It's great.
Yeah, and then Austin as the INFP harmonizer clarifier is like listening the whole time. Dario Nardi says that INFPs or FI dominants are the types that listen the most intensely. And then he's like clarifying yourself back to yourself, like giving you what he heard from your heart or from looking at you. So, yeah. And Raina, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's awesome how this is going to sound very effy here, but to me, what it demonstrates is if you're working in a team, how it's really, really cool if you can leverage the strengths of your team players, right, in a different phase of a project. Because I think what you see really like in real time here through our examples is this is a project potentially at a different phase, right? So mine, the examples I showed were like earlier in the process where you're just in the brainstorming phase. So you'd be like reaping the rewards of, you know, whoever's the any guy in the group, and potentially SI too from the let's frame it. So I mean, we've started a lot of our brainstorming from a what are just the core elements, almost in a templated fashion. Like if we're doing a course, we start there. And in fact, our beginning looks a lot like Austin's, right? That we have like the big components laid out, and then we try to like group them together and then go into the heart of the matter as Ron does. Like, is our word use okay to explain this concept? And then build out that way. So I love that each one of our examples highlights not only the strength of type, but like how type could be used to be like not in an exploitive fashion, but like in a really nice fashion in terms of like build on the expertise that you have if you're trying to produce a product. So, you know, Austin, in the software world, if you're like you do need to have that flow chart, and you almost, I think, have to have that in the back of your mind when you start, before you start brainstorming. That I'm adding to this here, but I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons why yours were very like separated, because you have to consider like this is the overarching, I need to get here to make it all work based on the system that I have. These are the constraints and restraints of that system. This is how it's framed. And then you have that space to allow you to like drill into it.
Yes.
So I love that it's like you can see function use, but you can also see application in different worlds, right? Like whether it's courseware, you're developing software, or in Ron's case, like really drilling to the heart of a thing, right? So I thought that was really cool to see all of ours together and be like, whoa, and it builds. So if I need more help with flowcharts, I know I'm going to Austin. And if I need like the heart of the thing, like getting to those, I had never thought of. I guess the language use is amazing to me too. Like just the idea of how much language and type language influences it. So I thought it illustrated that a lot.
Yeah, and it's a great way to leave off with the ENFJ giving a circle of affirmation. So I love it.
Effie love.
Effie love. Yes. Yeah. So thank you everyone for coming out today. Thank you, Raina, for making everyone feel warm through your mind maps and your words. Thank you, Austin, for having such a Austin, you tend to pay a lot of attention to people, and then like you're able to like eloquently observe and then let people know who they are. You tell me who I'm not and who I am, and like you make sure that I stay true to myself. So it's very sweet of you. And Ron, it's nice to see your very in-depth mind map. It shows me how deep I can go into thinking about something. And so you've traversed the intellectual landscape of types. So thanks everyone for coming out. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you all in the next episode.